So far, we've been talking about sidekicks and how they help the star or help the leader. But what happens when the sidekick begins to overshadow the star? That's what we'll be talking about today on this week's lesson. Hello, welcome to this week's lesson, and I'm Brian Vermeer on Mr. Vermeer's class, and we're continuing our series on sidekicks. Before I begin, I'd just like to remind you, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the Facebook channel, and if at all possible, support me on Patreon. So, today we're continuing our series about sidekicks, and we're going to be looking at David, who started off his career as a sidekick to King Saul. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 18. Now, by this time, Saul was the first king of Israel, but he had disobeyed God in several important matters. Most importantly, he started to give a sacrifice by himself rather than waiting for Samuel the prophet to come and offer it. And because of that, Samuel said, God has finally had enough. He's going to strip the kingdom from you and give it to somebody else. Samuel then goes and anoints David to be the next king of Israel. David is a shepherd, probably in his late teens. And Saul, around this same time, begins to receive a spirit, an evil spirit, that the Bible says is sent from God. We're going to talk about that a little more in a few minutes. And in order to soothe this evil spirit, or not soothe the spirit, but in order to soothe Saul, he hires David to come and play the harp for him. Later on, possibly a couple of years later, David goes to watch his brothers who have joined the army and are fighting for King Saul against the Philistines, and to take them some supplies and some food, when of course he runs into Goliath. And we know what happens there, very familiar passage. David kills Goliath with a stone thrown from a slingshot, and then cuts off Goliath's head. King Saul notices David really for the first time here, and we'll just see what happens here. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 18, starting in verses 5 to 7. It says, David marched out with the army and was successful in everything that Saul sent him to do. Saul put him in command of the fighting men, which pleased all the people and Saul's servants as well. As the troops were coming back when David was returning from killing the Philistine, the women came out from all the cities of Israel to meet King Saul, singing and dancing with tambourines, with shouts of joy, and with 3-stringed instruments. As they danced, the women sang, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. So let's put everything in order here. David kills Goliath. Saul, very impressed with this victory, immediately enlists David into his army and makes David a leader. It says he put him in command of the fighting men. We're not sure exactly how big of a rank this was. Probably not very high yet. Something similar to a non-commissioned officer in today's army, leading, maybe at the most 100 men or so. Because we know that he's going to be getting a promotion later. We're going to talk about that. But says Saul put him in command. Now he's very proud of David. Sorry about that. He's very proud of David, very pleased with what David is doing. David is going out and he's leading his men into victory after victory, and they're just beating the Philistines all over the place. So Saul puts David in the army. David has all these victories. Saul is very proud. They come back to the capital where Saul's palace is. And it says he was returning from killing the Philistines. So this is the first time he's come back since killing Goliath. He's killed Goliath and had all these other victories. And his reputation has already started to grow. It says the women came out from all the cities as they're coming back from the battle. Every city they come through, the women are coming out, they're dancing, they're singing, they're celebrating. This was a normal thing anyway. When an army would return, the women would come out mostly to greet their husbands or their boyfriends or whoever was in the army. And they would sing and dance, and it says they played instruments. And it says as they sang, they would sing, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." Now, how do they mean this is what we want to look at. Are they meaning this as an insult to King Saul? Because that's how he takes it. Now, they're not putting down Saul, at least not literally. They're not saying that Saul is a bad king. They're saying Saul has killed thousands of soldiers. But now, since David has joined the army, there are tens of thousands of enemy soldiers being killed. And I think that's probably what they meant by it. They probably are trying to say that Saul has done a good thing by bringing David into the army, because David has this great military mind, and David is a great leader, and he's able to, have all these victories. But that's not the way that Saul takes it. And we're going to see in our next reading what this is going to end up leading to. So let's continue now by looking at verses 8 through 11. It says, Saul was furious and resented this song. They've credited tens of thousands to David, he complained, but they only credited me with thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. The next day, an evil spirit sent from God came powerfully on Saul, and he began to rave inside the palace. David was playing the lyre as usual, but Saul was holding a spear, and he threw it, thinking, I'll pin David to the wall. But David got away from him twice. So Saul is not taking this song of victory very well. Saul's jealousy is starting to creep in. Now again, remember, Saul already knows that God is going to take the kingdom away, at least from his line. He knows his son Jonathan is not going to be the next king. God is going to give it to somebody else. So it's possible that all this time, Saul has, at least in the back of his mind, been kind of looking for who is going to be this next guy. Who's going to be this guy that God is going to give the kingdom to? And when he starts seeing David being very successful, he's probably thinking, that's it. That's the man. That's the guy who's going to take my throne. And even though it's already been ordained, even though it's already been, predestined for this, he's not taking it very well. Even though he knows he's going to be replaced, just the idea of knowing who his replacement is going to be is causing jealousy. And especially when that person who is not the king yet is receiving more accolades than he is. The question here is, why couldn't Saul just be happy for David? Or at least, why couldn't he just be happy with the things David has done? Be happy with the victories that David has achieved. David has taken away the threat of the Philistines. Saul should be pleased with that. If it was any other general, if it was any other military leader, you'd think Saul would be pleased. But instead, it's this young man who is now suddenly growing in popularity. Jealousy is a very bad thing, especially when you're trying to do your work for God, especially in the ministry. Ministers don't need to be comparing themselves to each other. Oh, he's got more converts than I do. They just don't like me that much. I could look at my channel with my less than 100 subscribers, which we're still very close to, as far as I know. And I could look at other channels, people who do similar things to what I do, and see their thousands of subscribers, and I could be very jealous. And do I want my channel to be that successful? Well, yes, I do. But I don't want theirs to decrease because of it. There's nothing wrong with ambition for yourself as long as it's for a good purpose. There's nothing wrong with wanting to improve yourself. There's nothing wrong with wanting to better yourself. But not at the sake of others. Not to bring others down. We should never wish failure on anybody. Saul is looking at these praises David is getting and is saying, the only next thing for him is to be king. What more can he have but the kingdom? So it says, Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. Saul is already looking for a way to kill David. What is he hoping to accomplish by this? Again, he's already been told that God is going to take the kingdom away from him and give it to someone else. Does he think he's going to change God's plan by killing David? Does he think that, well, if I kill David, then God won't be able to give it to anybody else, and I'll keep it? See, that's the way the jealous mind works. We start thinking about things that if we were thinking normally, we would know aren't really going to happen. I always love, watching in the movies where the bad guy kidnaps the girl, thinking that, well, if I kidnap her and take her away with me, then she'll fall in love with me and marry me. What makes you think she's going to do that because you kidnapped her and took her away from her other boyfriend? But this is the kind of thinking that Saul is having here. If I kill David, then God's going to have to leave the kingdom with me. And then it says, the next day an evil spirit came from God, or was sent from God, came powerfully on Saul. God is sending this evil spirit, this demon, to torment Saul. Or I guess a better way to put it, God is allowing this demon to torment Saul. Remember, the demons can't do anything unless God allows it. So God is allowing this to happen to Saul as a punishment to Saul, most likely. And it says the only way he can be soothed is when David would play his music. David would play his songs and sing praises to God. And that would drive away this demon. Maybe God is trying to tell Saul, look, you need to be doing like David. You need to be praising me. And it's also interesting, David is now a very successful military commander. But he's also still keeping his old job of playing the lyre for Saul. He's still Saul's, boy, you might say. He's still Saul's, servant, you might say. And it said David's playing the lyre. Saul is just sitting there, and he happens to be holding a spear. And he throws the spear at David, thinking, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to pin him to the wall. And notice it says David got away from him twice, so Saul misses. David dodges out of the way. The spear misses him. Saul goes and either gets another spear or goes and gets that spear again, and he throws it at him again. And David gets out of the way again and then flees the palace, is able to get out and get away. You're not going to stop God's plan. You're not going to prevent what God has already prophesied will happen. So let's finish up now by looking at verses 12 to 16 of 1 Samuel chapter 18. It says that Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had left Saul. Therefore Saul sent David away from him and made him commander over 1,000 men. David led the troops and continued to be successful in all his activities because the Lord was with him. When Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was leading their troops. So now Saul knows for sure God is definitely with David because I've tried to kill him and God's let him get away. And he's jealous of David. Why? Because David has God on his side, but it says God had left Saul. Now again, remember, this is all Saul's own doing. Saul has continually disobeyed God, and we don't see anywhere any signs of repentance. We do see one sign of remorse. When Samuel tells Saul that God's going to take the kingdom away from him, it says that Saul reaches up and tears Samuel's cloak as Samuel turns to walk away. But that's not repentance, that's remorse. That's just feeling bad about it. That's trying to get Samuel to come back and change his mind. Saul has yet to apologize to God. Saul has yet to show that he's repentant, that Saul has yet to admit that he did anything wrong. And that's why God is continuing to punish him. So what does Saul do here? He's jealous of David. He doesn't want David to be king, so he gives David a promotion. It says he sent him away from him and made him commander over 1,000 men. In today's military, that'd be about the equivalent of a battalion commander. That is the rank of lieutenant colonel, which is fairly high. That's almost general. So how is this going to get rid of David? Well, first of all, it's going to take David away from Saul. David's going to go off to battle. Saul's going to stay behind. David's going to go lead the troops. David, everyone thinks you're such a great leader anyway. You go lead the troops. I'll just stay here. And also, he's hoping that by sending David away to war, he's hoping that David is going to eventually be killed in battle. And that'll take care of it. If I send him away to war and he's killed in battle, then that's God's doing, not mine. I didn't kill him. God killed him. God let him be killed in the battle. But what happens? It says David led the troops and he continued to be successful in his activities because the Lord was with him. Now again, God is with David. God is not with Saul. And it says when Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. Saul is not looking at David as a great military leader under my kingship. He's not looking at David as one of my subordinates who is doing his job very well. He's looking at David as a potential rival for the throne. He's letting his jealousy get in the way of being happy for what David is doing. It says he dreaded him. Why? Because he knows God is with David and not with him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was leading their troops. David is becoming more and more and more popular among the people. And we all know what happens after this. Saul actually begins a manhunt for David. He tries to hunt David down and kill him. He chases David all through the wilderness, trying to kill him. And on several opportunities, we see that David actually turns it around and has a chance to kill Saul, but doesn't take it. Because Saul is the king, and it's not David's place, he says, to take the life of God's anointed king. So what do we need to get from this? No matter what position we're in, if we're the star or if we're the sidekick. If you're the star and you see the up and coming person who is maybe doing the same thing that you're doing and is having success at it, instead of looking at that person as a rival, we need to be happy for that person, especially in our calling for God. Whatever your God's calling for your life is, whatever it is God has called you to do, you're not the only one doing that job. I'm not the only one making Bible study videos, and I don't need to be jealous of anyone else who is doing it. Some of you who watch me, I know you do it as well, and I wish you much success. And in turn, I hope you wish me much success, because that just means the more people that can be reached. If Saul had just looked at the fact that David is having these great victories, and because of that, the enemy is being defeated, that could have made him happy. But instead, he looked at it as, David's having more success than I am, so I need to watch out for him. And that's not the attitude we need to take. And if you are the sidekick who is having the success, if you are the up-and-coming young star, don't gloat about it. Don't lord it over those that you're overtaking. We don't see anywhere in here David bragging about how he is more successful than Saul, or bragging about how he's going to become the next king. David has already been anointed the next king by this time, but he never brings it up. He never mentions it to Saul. He never mentions it to anyone, as far as we know. So humbleness goes both ways. And no matter which position you find yourself in, be humble and be happy for the other person. I think that's what we can get out of this. I'll see you again next week.